Well, speaking of history and some people that survived, should we bring our friend Steve Brown on?
Let's do it.
All right, Steve Brown, if you're there, guitarist from TRIXTER. Hello.
Is he there? I see his
He's off mute.
All right, there we
There
is.
he is.
Steve Brown
All right.
also plays guitar with this up-and-coming band called Def Leppard every once in a while. So, Steve, thanks for joining us. You have a great section in the book and some great quotes throughout. I mean, you were kind of at the tail end. TRIXTER got signed near the end of the 80s, right? And you were 18 years old when that happened, right?
Yeah.
So as a kid, this must have been just incredible for you.
First off, congratulations to Tom and Rich for writing this incredible book. And, we talked about it before, but I have to say, for everybody out there who is going to buy this book, you have to buy it, because it's, even for somebody like me who was there and lived it, this book has so many great stories that I didn't even know about. And that's what makes it so cool. It's so in-depth. So thank you guys. And, you hit a home run with it. So congratulations, and thanks for, and I'm honored to be a part of it, man. So again, from my heart, it's so good to see that all of my friends are in the book, some of my enemies. No, I'm just kidding. But, it was, look, anybody who was there, the guys know, Rich and Tom and all the guys that were there, when we lived it, it was the greatest, in my opinion, the most fun era of rock and roll music, probably the most fun era ever in life, the way things were, pre-internet, pre-cell phone. And it was just, when as a kid, I grew up, it started out with Van Halen and Kiss. In 1978, I started playing guitar, and it took over my life. When I was a little kid, and it was, I wanted to know everything about every band, whether it was Stars, Kiss, Van Halen, Angel, all those bands, then Quiet Riot, Def Leppard, of course, Def Leppard, which is great because, I sometimes play with the guys. They were the band that inspired me. When I found out that Rick Allen was 15 years old when he signed with Def Leppard, when they signed their deal, I was like, shit, man, if he can do that, I'm going to start TRIXTER. And I started TRIXTER when I was 12 years old in 1983. And,
Where do you play when you're 12 years old?
You can play, well, the good thing was my father was the vice principal of our middle school. So the first gig that we did, we weren't TRIXTER yet. We were actually called RAID, R-A-D-E, sort of take on the Rock Brigade, the RAID Brigade. And we played my middle school, Eastbrook Middle School, and we did Van Halen tunes, Motley Crue, Dio, Rat, I think, Ozzy, and I think we did one original, this one song called Do You Know What Love Is? And I was playing my Ibanez Iceman guitar that was probably as big as I was, wearing parachute pants, and so it was just a magical time. And as we know, like the guys said, as fans of it, as much as I was playing and writing and learning, I was such a fan. I knew everything about every band. I knew who Eddie Van Halen's guitar tech was before anybody. I knew it was Rudy Laren, back in the day. I knew who their tour manager was. I knew everything about every band. And that's, I think, Rich and Tom would probably say the same thing. We were so invested. It was our heart and soul. And so much different than the way it is nowadays.
Well, you're 12 years old, and then we go, and you're much an older man at 18. Suddenly you're touring with Poison, Slaughter. I mean, fresh out of high school, what does that do to you? I mean, are your parents with you?
PJ Farley, our bass player, his mom actually had to sign a release form because we were making our first record out in California, and PJ got to skip his senior year of high school because of that. So he got really lucky, but his mom had to sign a form. But I was 18 when we signed our deal, and so I didn't have to do that. But PJ, yeah, we had to get consent from his mom. So thank you, Claudia, for doing that. And but it was just, like I've said so many times, I'm so grateful. Every dream that I ever had came true, and that was it, But at the time, and I think I told Tom, and I think I've told Rich, when I started the band and when we were going, it was just a way of life for us. We didn't think about how lucky we were. It was just the way we did it. We saw in New Jersey, we saw the success of Bon Jovi and then our friend Skid Row, and we were all kind of in that scene. Our good producer friend Jack Ponte was having great success working with bands, and we were part of it. And then there were the other bands, the TT Quick and Prophecy, these great bands with these incredible guitar players. Zach Wilde was playing in Xyrus. It was just a magical time. And and getting back to White Lion, I remember when TRIXTER was starting to really get going, I used to go sneak and go to L'Amour backstage, like when White Lion was playing, and I'd hang out with Vito, and he'd be sitting there smoking a cigarette, and I'd watch him at sound check, and he'd always go to me. He'd go, Dud, you got any Marshalls you want to sell? He'd be like, I'd be like, no, dude, I only have one. That's why I would bust his balls. I would say, that's why I came here, because I came to steal a Marshall from you, dude. But it was just, man, and in this book, you get that feeling when you read it, and especially the other stories, and learning about all these bands. And, one of the coolest things for me about the book and reading it was the whole LA scene, because I wasn't privy to that, and I was kind of too young at the time, so to learn about the connection of Poison, Stryper, LA Guns, and Guns N' Roses, and then a couple other bands, but those four, they're all kind of intertwined in some weird way, and I never really knew about that. Michael Sweet's a really good buddy of mine, and he kind of told me certain things when we toured with them back in 1990, but like seeing it for real, it's like, wow. And then everything sort of makes sense because you see the trajectory of where everybody went, and it's
was there any kind of like competitive thing, like West Coast bands suck, being that you were an East Coast band? Did you feel there was a difference between the two?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've told this story many times, and I think I told it to Tom, when we interviewed, but when we went out to do our first record. So here's the cool thing. The first time that I went to LA, right after we signed our deal, my manager Ken and I went out to California to interview producers, and I did some co-writes. I actually co-wrote a song with this guy Mick Smiley, who co-wrote Kiss Me Deadly by Lita Ford, and that was my thing. It was like during the time when everybody's writing with everybody, the Desmond Childs and the Jack Pontes and blah blah blah. And so I wrote this song, and it was this song called This Town. It wasn't that good, but it was cool to work with Mick, and he was a really cool guy. But long story short, being out there, the first other, like, let's say, competitive rock star I ever met, who's become a dear friend of mine, was Ken and I were going to Rick Rubin's office. He had just started American Records, I believe, and we were going over. And the guy who produced our first demo tape, like the one that helped get our record deal, was George Draculius, who produced the first two Black Crowes records. He went to college with my manager, Ken Mako. George, Rick Rubin, they all went to NYU together. So we went out to see Rick. And walking in, as I'm walking in, who's walking out? Stevie Rochelle from Tough. And I was like, I thought it was Bret Michaels. And I'm like, what the fuck is Bret Michaels doing here? And it was Stevie. And, every time I talk about that. And he was so cool to me. But as time went on, we went out there to do our first record, and we went to like the Foundation's Forum, which was a huge thing. The Foundation's concrete marketing, they had this big thing, and it was where all these bands, it was like kind of a band NAMM show, radio and TV, MTV All Mine. And it was the first time we met a lot of the other like LA bands. It was the first time that we saw like these guys, they fucking hate our guts. You could tell. And it was like this, you saw that competition thing. And then it was the first time that we ever got to see the Sunset Strip on a Saturday night, walking up Sunset Strip and seeing these bands doing the flyer thing, because we never really did that. And you saw how dog-eat-dog it was. And but I remember meeting a lot of the bands, and I'm not going to mention any names, but some of these guys were like, they'd come up, oh man, you guys got a record deal? Well, you better watch out for us. Because we're the and it was like, whoa, and some of these guys were on our label, and it was, it was a different mindset, and I've said this numerous times, the Jersey thing, we were all like brothers, John Bon Jovi was the first guy who took a liking to TRIXTER and always believed in us and helped us out, and then he introduced us to, the Skid Row guys, Dave and Rachel and Scotty, and we became, really good friends with them. And that helped us so much. And we helped each other to some degree. The first time Skid Row ever played in America with Sebastian, they played at Studio One, TRIXTER opened up. And that was the night that they basically got signed. I remember sitting in the dressing room with Sebastian and Jason Flom sitting there, and Snake introduces me to him, and Baz is teasing his hair up, and he goes, I think he was 19 at the time, and he goes, yes, Snake tells me you're 17 years old, man. You're young. I thought I was the youngest dude on the scene. I'm like, well, no, man, I'm the youngest dude on the scene now. Well, and wait till you meet my bass player. He's only 16. So it was just, it was magical.
Well, you talk about the internet, pre-cell phone days, and I think that was a big part of it. People, you had to go out on a weekend to explore. You had to go to L'Amour's, you had to go to Studio One. It was the only way to really meet other people, but you would hear about this band and you'd want to go check them out.
I mean, the other thing too is that I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Jim.
No, go ahead, Tom.
No, is that one thing. The power of both Dial MTV, which was every weekday where you would call in and people would request videos, and of Headbangers Ball, there was a critical mass where we all saw the same thing at the same time. Like I can tell you that the TRIXTER video, they've got like the dirt bikes in it, and they're going, but Rich knows that too, and everybody else knows it because there was one sort of delivery mechanism. And I think that's why like this music still, there was a real critical mass of like these, you went and you watched Headbangers Ball and then you went and bought those records, but there was only that number of bands that you were exposed to. So we all have like a very shared common experience of this music, which now with the internet where you can listen to anything at any time, like it's too diffuse for it to have this impact on this many kids at one time, I think.
Well, I want to bring this up, and Steve, you might have a good view on this. And I mentioned at the beginning of the night how Nirvana kind of hovers in this book throughout. Where the metal bands were having a field day in the 80s. It really was, everywhere, MTV, radio. And then all of a sudden, Nirvana comes out, and they're not glamming up. They're dressing down, flannel. They're ripped up, kind of punky. And what happened? All of a sudden, record companies are saying, "Oh, let's go check this scene out now." And all these other bands kind of got left, and TRIXTER, you put out your second record right a couple weeks after Nirvana's Nevermind came out. Right? So how did that feel?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, here's the story. It was, and this is how TRIXTER was a part of it. So flannel shirts. Who was wearing flannel shirts on MTV before anybody? Well, it was TRIXTER. That's right. So, but Our radio guy, this guy Bill Bennett, who was the radio guy at MCA Records, well, he left MCA right after our third single, I believe in like May of 1991. He got hired. I think he became the president of Geffen Records. And so at the end, we had been on tour by the October of 1991 for 13 months. We finished this great tour with Warrant and Firehouse. Unbelievable. We're in LA for a week. We're all living at the Hyatt House on, Hyatt on Sunset, living life, hanging out with Pauly Shore and, and Dice Clay, the Kings of Hollywood, the Rainbow. So we go to see our friend Bill Bennett, who was very instrumental in Trixter's success, the radio success, and getting us, we love the guy. And so we go to his office at Geffen because, of course, why do we go to Geffen Records? We want to get free CDs and free T-shirts and shit. So we go there, and Bill goes, hey, guys, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. He goes, hey, I want to play you guys this new band that's starting to blow up at radio, and tell me what you think. And he fucking put on Smells Like Teen Spirit, and I was like, wow, this is cool. And I'm like, listen to it. I'm like, it sounds kind of got like, it's kind of got like a unique, like I knew it had like an alternative vibe. And I'm like kind of like Cheap. I hear a little Cheap Trick in there. I heard the melody. I heard a little Black Sabbath. To me, the guitar sound was like Sabbathy when he kicked in the overdrive pedal. And it was just one of those things where it was like, oh, this is cool. And, he said, yeah, they're really starting to sell, getting a lot of ads and stuff. So he gave us the whole like press pack and the, the original promo T-shirt with the smiley face on it. And lo and behold, how did we ever know that day all of us walking back from Geffen Records up Sunset Strip carrying the Nirvana sort of press kit along with Guns N' Roses CDs and Tesla, that this would be the band to single-handedly sort of wipe out our genre. But it did, and it was, another year later for us in October of 1992 when we released the second Trixter record, which incidentally we renegotiated with MCA in January of 1992. We got $1 million, after the success. Every band usually tries to renegotiate with the label, but we had an interesting thing because we were on Mechanic Records, which was part of MCA, but once we took off, MCA took over. So we were able to renegotiate, and we got $1 million deal. We got a $500,000 advance and a $500,000 recording budget. And so we were living in this world where we didn't really know what was going on musically because we were going to start making the record of our dreams. We hired Jimbo Barton from Rush and Queensryche, was going to co-produce the record with me. And I had written what I thought was my Sgt. Pepper's, the great rock record, my Hysteria, my Slippery When Wet, which I still think we did. But we released the record. We made a video. We made a, $200,000 video. And we were on tour with Kiss. And I remember calling my manager. We would me and PJ, call our manager every day. When's MTV going to add your video? They're going to add it next week. They're going to add it next week. Finally, I remember like 2 weeks into the Kiss tour, my manager called me and said, dude, I got bad news. MTV's not playing your video. And it was like, that was it. Cold and hard, and it was like we kind of knew it was going to be a tough road from there. And like I said in the book, luckily we had a really great booking agent, this guy Mitch Rose, who's at CAA still to this day, still books Kiss and Bon Jovi, and he kept us out on the road for 10 months. But man, it got harder and harder, and some of those nights on the Kiss tour were really, really rough.
Well, the irony is, had internet existed then, all these bands maybe could have kept going, but
yeah.
It seems like the labels and press just kind of totally shifted their focus,
And look, we all know what happens in any genre of music when something becomes so big and the bubble is so big, it has to burst. It happens all the time, and it happened to all the bands, and it happened to all the grunge bands. And it was really cool to see, in the book, Jerry Cantrell talk about that. He was really honest because, most of the grunge bands, they started out in the 80s, most of them, they all wanted to be Van Halen. They all wanted to be Def Leppard. They were part of it with us. I remember when we toured with Poison in 1991, Alice in Chains were out the week before with them opening up. So it's like, you know, we're all, and yeah, at the end of the day, when I see all those guys now, and we're all buds, and it's all, you know, it's great, you know, to have, look, we all know to have any success whatsoever in this business, we are some of the luckiest people on earth.
Well, your attitude of it is great, and I think it's the right way to be, you know, so.
And it's interesting. Rich could probably speak to this because he interviewed Kim Thale of Soundgarden and Jerry Cantrell for the book, and they actually have like a really, you know, they're kind of emphatic in not wanting to be held responsible. Rich, how do you always phrase it better than me? Right?
Well, what they both said, and really unprompted of one another, is like, we didn't create, you know, our career wasn't motivated by trying to kill somebody else's career. Like that's absurd. A, because why would you do that? And B, like, you know, we actually had our own creative path to follow, and it wasn't based on trying to hurt somebody else. And like, it was something that really was, like Steve said, early on, a lot of these bands, there was a lot of camaraderie, and they toured with each other and they played shows with each other. And I think the shame is like, I mean, I loved all that stuff when it came in, you know, Nirvana and Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, but like, you can have two thoughts in your head at the same time. You know, you can love that stuff and still love the stuff that you loved in the 80s, you know, and it was seen, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, it was seen by its detractors as this sort of softer music and very overly produced and corporate. But like, you're looking at a guy like Steve Brown, I mean, he started his band when he was 12 years old. And then by 18, he's touring the world and like hanging out with Eddie Van Halen because he has spent his life devoted to his instrument. Like, that's about like as badass as you can get, you know, like, and so there's nothing soft about that. And like, you know, but for some reason it was just posited as this like us or them thing, and not by the grunge bands. It wasn't the guys in the bands doing it. But it did happen.
I mean, the darkest thing in the whole book for me, like it's not that dark, but it's very telling, and it goes by really fast. But Tom Kiefer from Cinderella is talking about doing a tour in the mid 90s, like 93, 94. And they had actually made a good record. And they've got a tour stop in Seattle. And they're not trying to get on the radio station to do promo. They're trying to buy an ad on the radio station to promote their show. And the radio station's like, no way, we don't want your money. Like, we don't want any contact with Cinderella. So it really was a music that was, I mean, like, we use the word canceled now, but it really was. And, you know, maybe part of it is because the music had run its course, like every other music runs its course. But that aftermath was just...
It was brutal. It really was, you know. Someone is asking an interesting question here, and I just lost it. I lost their name. Sorry, but they were asking. You know, we know who a lot of the bad boys were during this period in bands. Who were some of the nice ones besides Steve, of course?
Well, I mean, I will say this about people in metal bands, be it these like hard rock and even heavy metal bands. People in metal bands are generally the nicest people, seriously, that you will ever speak to, and probably the scarier the band, the nicer the dudes are.
Careful, you're blowing a lot of illusions.
But you know, most people in these bands got into it because they wanted to play music, not because they wanted to get like completely like blotto. I don't know, who do you think, guys? Who are the nicest guys in of the era?
Well, one thing I would say, and Steve.
I mean, you know, for me, you know, Eddie Van Halen. You know, I mean, when you get to meet your idol and he turns out to be the coolest guy in the world and the most humble, and like, you know, if he was here right now talking to us, he'd be no different. You know, I mean, There's so many like that, you know, as far as how nice everybody was. Bret Michael, I mean, everybody was great to us. I mean, we had so many great experiences, you know, and I mean, we had a couple bad ones, but I don't want to mention any names because we've patched all those things up. And but you know, Eddie Van Halen, Bret Michaels, the Poison guys were unbelievable. Like every band we ever toured with was great to us. Don Dokken, Uncle Don, he would come, and when we toured with him, he would come in our tour bus and hang out and tell us stories. He's drinking his Jack and Coke and tell us stories about Van Halen when they were playing. I remember lending Eddie one of my heads, and you know, I'd be sitting there just grilling these guys and I still to this day, anytime I'm hanging out with everybody, I just want to hear old Van Halen stories. You know, about the guys, you know, like Mark Kendall, all these guys that grew up seeing Van Halen play in the clubs. But, you know, again, the Bon Jovis, the Skid Rows, the list goes on and on. I think, you know, and the guys, you know, Rich and Tom will tell you, they've interviewed, was anybody a jerk, really? You know, even back in the day, everybody was so much fun. I think it was because we were all having nothing but a good time, you know, and it was the best. It was the best of times for us, especially when things were going well, you know. And, you know, the coolest thing for me is at this point, so many years later, you know, and of course, you know, every once in a while I get to play with Def Leppard. Those guys, I met them when I was 17 years old, and Phil Collin and I were, you know, he's like family to me. And all those guys in that band, they were by far probably one of the nicest, because when you meet a band when they are at their absolute zenith and they come off stage playing 3 nights sold out at the Meadowlands in every arena around the country, and they come off stage and they just, you know, Phil will sit there and talk to me for 10 minutes while he's soaking wet, just came off stage. Eddie Van Halen would do the same thing, you know. So I mean, that just goes to show you, and I think that goes for a lot of guys in the biz.
Well, and you know, that was also one of the eye-opening things in the book, where yeah, all these guys are, you know, there's some crazy stuff going on, but no one really comes across it like an asshole, you know, which was kind of nice, you know. For someone who wasn't immersed in that scene back then, it made the book that much more interesting, you know.
Yeah, I think everybody was just kind of, I mean, look, these guys were young, you know, these are kids in their early 20s, sometimes they're teens like Steve. And like, you know, they're just kind of, a lot of them, like the world just opens up to them, and this is what happens. You know, and like going back to what you were saying before, another guy who really comes off great throughout the book is John Bon Jovi. You know, everybody that comes in contact with this guy just talks about how hard he works. And if he can, he helps a lot of these bands. He helps Cinderella get a deal. He helps Skid Row get a deal. Clearly, he was involved with TRIXTER in the early days, like, because they were another New Jersey band. Like, he is there really helping a lot of these baby bands along, you know, sometimes actively and sometimes just by bringing them out on tour and treating them well. So he's a guy that really, and I think that surprised Tom and I a little bit, just because of how, you know, successful and famous John Bon Jovi is. You figure that's the guy that everyone's going to try to take down because he was really on top. But you don't get that in the book. You just get the sense that he was a guy who was just working hard and was willing to help somebody else who might be working just as hard.
The one guy for me, and Rich really did most of this reporting, so when I was reading his chapters on this stuff, like I was, as a reader of the book, you know, Rich did all of this reporting around the Guns N' Roses formation, and he goes really deep into it. And Axl Rose is a person who comes across as incredibly intense, and it really seems to me like that the formation of Guns N' Roses is the story of musicians finding themselves on common ground, but also a group of people assembling around this immensely talented person, but the people who can take the aura coming off this guy. Like the people who end up in the final version of Guns N' Roses are people who can hang with the volatility that is inherent to Axl Rose. And I think he really does, you know, he's the real, like, and everybody who meets him in the book is like, he's the real deal. Like, he did not suffer fools. He was not going to agree with you because he wanted to. He's the one person who really, like, comes off as, like, I don't know if scary is the right word, but like someone you really wouldn't want to tangle with or rub the wrong way. And that's probably why he succeeded as much as he did too.
He's the Van Morrison of heavy metal. So
Yeah.
Philip is watching from the UK, and a question about bands that transcend genre, and he uses Motorhead as an example, listened by punks back in the day in the UK, and along with rockers, and survived for 40 years. And Lemmy, was known for living right there in Hollywood, and was kind of a grandfather to a lot of these bands also. We talked about Bon Jovi helping. Are there other people that you think have transcended, or will carry on and touch all these bands and be vital,
The guys in a weird different way, because they're like this, there's this undercurrent through the book. The guys in Kiss are Gene Simmons appears. It's sort of I'm giving you sort of the opposite answer of your question, but Gene Simmons is like a recurring character in this book, where he shows up like it's with Cinderella. Obviously he actually brought Van Halen to do their first demos, but he was like, look, the name sucks, and he tried to tell Van Halen that they should be called Daddy Longlegs because he thought that Van Halen sounded like Van Huysen shirts, and he presented them with a drawing of a spider with 8 platform boots on a top hat. But he keeps reappearing through the book. With Cinderella, he appears, I think, with Warrant. He appears several times trying to get to sign these bands. And none of the bands ever sign with them because he's offering onerous deals. But those guys are sort of floating around. Paul Stanley almost produces Kiss. And they are a band that transcends this. They were there before and after.
Well, they were certainly an inspiration, not only musically but fashion-wise too. So to answer Philip's point, I think Kiss is a good example. And I noticed Trixter. You talk about the flannel shirts. You guys were not glamming it up, and also you're at the end of kind of the 80s of the hair metal, for lack of a better term. Was that by choice? Were you pressured at all by the labels to ponce it up a little?
No. Our thing was very Bergen County, New Jersey, where we grew up, Paramus, New Jersey, and we were very proud of who we were, and we were very confident. I think anybody who knew us back in the day, especially me, there was never any lack of confidence. And this is, for me, it was always, and I was always telling the guys, this is what we're going to do, blah, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to, we're going to have fun. Look, all I ever wanted to be was Van Halen, it was like all I wanted to do is kind of combine those elements, fun, we wanted to smile. I remember one time, somebody came and saw me play. This guy, Dan Lorenzo, who from the band Hades, you guys know him. He was a Paramus guy, and I remember him seeing me in the clubs, and he said to me, he's like, "You need to stop smiling. You smile too much. You smile." And I go, "You ever see Eddie Van Halen? He's always smiling. It's worked out for him, But for us, it was just, this is what we did, and we had our own thing, very much like the way Skid Row had their thing, or Guns N' Roses, or Bon Jovi, or Tough, or any of the bands that had their style. We had our own thing, and our thing was about instead of riding Harleys, we were riding dirt bikes and quads behind our middle school in the trails, riding dirt bikes. It was just a different thing. Me and Pete especially, we were athletes. I was playing, baseball and football while I was still rocking. So we were in shape and stuff. We didn't get polluted yet by the rock and roll world, And, I was still living home with my parents, and we were rehearsing in my mom and dad's, in my parents' house in Paramus, New Jersey. We would have when the record companies would come out and see us, they would come to Paramus to my mom and dad's house, and we'd give them ShopRite iced tea and ShopRite pretzels. And that's what we'd have, and my mother would make sandwiches. I remember the whole Geffen record staff came out to my parents' house, and we're rehearsing, and my mom's making sandwiches, and you gotta, these kids, they're so great, and that's just the way it was. And so we just felt comfortable wearing, Chuck Taylors, tight jeans, and and rock shirts. And it was kind of like, if you look, we were kind of like, I think we had more in common fashion wise with Metallica to some degree than we did with, let's say White Lion, who was wearing all the floor clothes and that whole thing.
Well, that was definitely more Long Island,
Yeah. That was a Long Island, Brooklyn, Staten Island thing. But, it just what it was. And, instead of hanging out at the Rainbow Bar and Grill, we hung out at Suburban and Twin Oaks Diner on Route 17 in Paramus, eating disco fries.
Yes.
Well,
let's not even bring up disco, because that messed up everything. Well, guys, anything else you want to touch upon? This has been a great night,
No, I think we've touched. Yeah. I've probably told Steve this before, but as someone who is exactly his age, I am guilty of the deadly sin of, as an 18-year-old, of envy of Steve Brown. So I would like Steve Brown to know that you did lead my best life. So congratulations.
Hey, you know what? As in life, and Joe Elliott said this to me before the first time I played with Def Leppard. Somebody's got to do it, mate. Being like the villain or living life. He said to me before we went on, I said, oh man, happy to do this, blah, blah, thanks for bringing me. He goes, well, somebody's got to do it, mate, and it might as well be you. There you go.
And someone's got to read this book, Nothing But a Good Time, and it might as well be all you guys out there, all you people.
For sure.
Great book, Richard Bienstock, Tom Beaujour, really well done. Steve Brown, thank you for joining us. And
thank you, James.
The book's available here at Little City. You can buy it online. Check out TRIXTER and check out what Steve's doing. And that's it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank all of you.
Nothing but a good time. Great job, guys. Awesome book.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
See you later,
thank you,
man.
James.
Thanks a lot.